Malcolm Grant stepped out of the sleek black town car, the early morning light casting a faint glow on the tarmac outside the private terminal. His polished Italian loafers made a soft click against the stone floor as he entered the building. Tall, composed, and dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit like it had been sewn onto him, Malcolm exuded quiet power. His arrival drew glances, not for who he was, which the right people already knew, but for how he carried himself. As CEO of a global venture capital firm, Malcolm had long since grown used to the luxury that accompanied his status. But luxury was never the point. For Malcolm, excellence was the standard, and today was no exception. He was headed to Zurich for a high-stakes summit with top investors and heads of state. A critical deal was on the line, one that could shape the future of emerging markets across Africa and Southeast Asia. Everything had to go perfectly. He walked through the private gate, his boarding pass scanned with barely a glance from the ground staff. Within moments, he stepped onto the jet bridge that led to the first-class cabin of Flight 738, bound for Switzerland. The cabin was quiet, plush, and soaked in understated elegance, white linens, soft leather seating, and warm ambient lighting. He slipped into his seat, setting down his laptop bag and signaling to the attendant for his usual, a specific blend of herbal tea he always drank before major meetings. It helped him focus, helped him center himself. A few minutes later, a young flight attendant approached. Her smile was polite but tight, and her body language hinted at discomfort she couldn't hide. "Mr. Grant," she said, "I'm so sorry we were out of the herbal tea you requested. Here's a coffee instead." Malcolm glanced down at the steaming cup she held out to him. "Excuse me?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with confusion. "We just don't have any more," she replied, her voice trailing off. He gave a small nod, more to himself than to her, and reached for the cup. That's what happened. As she leaned over, the tray tilted too fast, too carelessly, and a stream of hot coffee sloshed over the rim. It spilled onto the sleeve of Malcolm's suit jacket, soaking the fine wool and burning into his skin beneath. He inhaled sharply. "Damn it," the attendant gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." But Malcolm wasn't listening to her apologies. He was focused on the stain, the spreading wetness that soaked into a suit worth more than her month's salary. He dabbed at it with a cloth napkin, lips pressed tightly together, every movement precise and measured. It wasn't the coffee. It was the way she dismissed his order. It was the way no one had cared enough to make sure a first-class passenger received what he expected. And it was the fact that he knew, deep in his gut, that this would not have happened if he were anyone else. Malcolm slowly leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. The moment sat in the air like smoke, thick and cloying. He tapped the armrest of his seat lightly, once, twice. "Give me the pilot," he said. The attendant froze. "Sir." "You heard me," Malcolm said, his voice quiet but unyielding. "I'd like to speak to the captain. Now." She disappeared behind the curtain without another word. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Malcolm's mind had already moved 10 steps ahead. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a tactician. In this moment, this insult was going to cost the airline dearly. He looked out the window, the ground below already shrinking into nothingness. The jet engines hummed as they cut through the clouds. Malcolm's thoughts were sharper than ever. When the pilot finally emerged, Malcolm didn't waste time. "I'm requesting an immediate route change," he said. The captain blinked. "Sir, we're already in the air. Is there an emergency?" "There will be," Malcolm said, his voice like steel. "I have a situation that requires me to land sooner than planned. I suggest you cooperate unless you want this airline to deal with more than a PR disaster." The captain hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I'll speak with air traffic control." Malcolm leaned back, satisfied. He wasn't bluffing. He never did. The call to his assistant had already been made. The complaint was drafted. The press was on standby, and the stockholders of this airline would be watching every move from this moment forward. The flight attendants moved stiffly around the cabin now, all aware of what had happened. Carla, one who had spilled the coffee, kept his head down and avoided Malcolm's gaze entirely. Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He didn't need to. His influence rippled through the cabin like a rising tide. And soon, it would flood the boardrooms of the airline's top brass. By the time the plane landed at a rerouted airfield in Lyon, the world had already begun to take notice. Malcolm stepped off the aircraft calmly, phone pressed to his ear as his assistant read off the list of executives already scrambling to issue statements. "The media is picking it up," she said. "We've got interest from 5 major outlets. They're asking for a statement." "Give them this," Malcolm said. "A first-class seat means nothing without first-class respect." Over the next 48 hours, the story took on a life of its own. The image saw Malcolm stepping off the plane, of executives ducking behind tinted glass, of panicked phone calls spread like wildfire. A major publication ran the headline, "CEO forces emergency landing after racial disrespect in first class." The article didn't just go viral, it sparked conversation. Investors pulled out. The airline's board called an emergency meeting. Behind the scenes, Malcolm had already begun negotiating. By the time the weekend hit, 3 senior executives were forced to resign, including the VP of Customer Experience and the Chief of Cabin Operations. The airline CEO, under immense pressure, requested a personal meeting with Malcolm. It was held in a high-rise boardroom in Manhattan. Daniel Lang, the CEO, walked in with a nervous smile and 2 PR advisors flanking him. Malcolm was already seated at the head of the table, a glass of water at his side, and his legal team watching from the wings. "Mr. Grant," Lang began, extending a hand. Malcolm didn't move. "You're not here to shake hands," he said. "You're here to explain why your company still doesn't understand the meaning of respect." Lang shifted uncomfortably. "We've issued an apology. We're launching a full internal review." "Apologies don't mean anything without action," Malcolm interrupted. "So here's what you're going to do. You're going to implement mandatory bias and service training across all international routes. You're going to review your first-class service standards. And you're going to release a public statement acknowledging that discrimination, however subtle, is unacceptable in your company." Lang's mouth opened, then closed again. "And," Malcolm added, "you're going to donate $5 million to a foundation of my choosing that supports young Black professionals entering aviation and hospitality." Lang stared at him. $5 million. "If you can afford to pour hot coffee on a Black CEO," Malcolm said evenly, "you can afford $5 million to ensure it doesn't happen again." There was no negotiation. By the end of the week, the airline had complied. The public saw the headlines and praised Malcolm's restraint. But he hadn't done this for the headlines. He did it to remind everyone that respect was not optional. Back in his office, overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Malcolm sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, as he watched a news anchor on mute. The segment showed his image next to bold text, "Justice at 30,000 feet." He reached for his tea, the proper blend, delivered by his own staff, and took a slow sip. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The world already knew who held the real power, and they would not forget his name.